Cian McEnroe, welcome to Straight to the Source, brother. Welcome,
Great to
welcome.
be here, Tim. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm excited about this conversation.
Well, it's beautifully kind of synchronized as well because obviously we spoke last year on your beautiful podcast, Humankinder, and didn't you say that's coming out this week?
It's coming out this week on Tuesday. It's out now, out today.
Today. So you're releasing that. We're recording this. I think it's kind of perfect. And I just wanted to just honor you because the interview that Elise and I both did with you was beautifully curated, amazing setup. You know, you drove over to do that live with us. It was like it's inspirational. I am not there yet, but the equipment and the professionalism and everything you put into it was actually really incredible. And just I'll get you to talk to that now and just explain to myself and the listeners, you know, what you're up to now, what's important in your life right now.
Yeah, so the critical thing for me about life has always been to be first and foremost a seeker and a practitioner. And where does that take you then is the interesting journey. And I think we are dropped into this experience, and it's quite a radical thing because you're dropped in and we absolutely know nothing. We know nothing about what's going on here. We don't even know how I am formulating these sentences and speaking them to you. How are you hearing them? How am I moving my hands? We don't even know what's going to come out of our mouths next. And so we're dropped into this experience. And I think our only prerogative when we're dropped in is to seek truth and to serve it. And when I say truth, I mean we're exploring the environment around us with our senses, with whatever faculties we have, and we're just trying to make sense of it and then really put that into practice and how do we operate in the world. And for me, that's been the journey. I think we're all on that journey to do that. And for me, that really started with growing up with a father who was a psychologist and a leadership consultant and a mother who was a nurse. And she also practiced energy healing and Reiki. And so the particular specialization that I got exposed to was understanding the nature of us as human beings. How do we work? How do our heads work? How do our bodies work? And that for me has been a constant source of fascination because I've just seen how the more you understand yourself and the more you understand the inner mechanics of your inner world, the better your life gets. And Humankinder, as a podcast platform, is about that exploration. It's about exploring what is going on here in this reality that we're in. What can we understand about ourselves at the psychological level, then on the spiritual level or on the level of soul beyond our psychology? And then what can we understand about the nature of the cosmos that we're in? And so it really is based on the exploration of that. And then the other side of Humankinder is the practical application of that into people's lives. And so I work with people in organizations to help create high-performing collective organizations and teams. I work on messy people problems. I work on culture problems. I work on leadership challenges. And it's all the same stuff. It's all understanding our inner landscapes and how that translates into the outer. And then how do we work in alignment with that? And then I also do some one-to-one work. And that in particular is around using a practice called the soul alignment method, which is a method started by a guy called Miles Traynor, who's an Irish guy, a dear friend of mine and also a mentor. And he has come up with a 5-phase method for the modern spiritual seeker, which is taking all of the Eastern traditions that we so love in the seeking world and bringing them together with the whole idea of purpose and living your soul's purpose, which I know you're a big fan of, Tim, and also trauma healing, psychological work, goal setting, conscious relating, and also building conscious communities. So it's really about integrating a lot of the disparate parts of the spiritual and the psychological into one method. And so we work on that, and it's centered around uncovering your soul's purpose. And so they're the 3 areas that I mainly work in now, which is podcasting about these areas. There's the one-to-one work, the psychotherapy and the spiritual work and soul alignment work. And then also, how does that actually play out in organizations and businesses? And how do we create the businesses of the future where people are awakened, who've consciously awakened people running our organizations? And so those are the three areas. And the main area actually underneath it all is the individual journey, the individual seeking quest, because from that individual quest comes everything else. It's an inside out approach, because when you start to work on yourself, you start to notice that the universe is knowing itself uniquely through me. And I'm here to fully participate in that human experience, while also realizing that I'm a soul embodied in the human experience, and that ultimately at the highest level, we are all the one consciousness experiencing itself. And so to live at all those levels and then be as effective in the world at all those levels, to seek truth at all those levels and serve that truth at all those levels is, for me, ultimately why I'm here. And that's what I focus on as much as I can.
That's a very involved yet succinct description of pretty much all the things that light my heart and my soul. No wonder you're on here early, and no wonder that we connected. And yeah, I just wanted to honor that, like, and just the complexity of what you just, put on the table then, like so much. I mean, like the inner work and the internal aspects are just reflected by the world, right? Anyway, so it's always an opportunity to stare in the mirror at ourselves. But the truth seeking, like that's such I mean, for the times at hand, that is right where we're at right now, right? Where we're seeing the lies, we're seeing like all of the manipulation, the coercion, and it's like as much as we've accidentally been doing that from our own indoctrination, in some ways, we're seeing how the system has created us, and now we're having this opportunity to awaken in a sense. And so, like what I hear and what you're saying is you're helping people to wake up to their truth.
Yeah, I am doing my absolute best to wake up myself. And
Yeah.
what that means, awakening, what does it mean? Enlightenment. Um, it's the question is, what are we becoming awake to? And very simply put, we are coming awake to deeper and deeper truths in the cosmos. Right, we come in and we're in a very limited level right now, you and I. We have very limited access to reality. And so when you think about truth, it's simply put, what is, what actually is. And so we only really know what is because we run experiments in our life. We go, okay, so if if I'm kind to other people, and for the next 24 hours, I'm going to see the other person as myself and practice being kind, how does that affect my life? Does it create more order, or does it create more chaos? And it applies in every domain of our life. Let's say physical exercise. It's like there are certain ways to move your body that's in alignment with the way the body wants to move. And when you move in those ways, you're closer to truth. You're more in alignment with that truth, which is the way things work. And things work out better for you, creates more order. And so simply then that inquiry after what works, when it turns back onto self, that is the awakening journey. That's the seeking impulse. I think one of the most beautiful quotes to articulate is to understand, what do we mean by sin, right? So sin in the Bible is quite a loaded term, but the actual original meaning of sin is to miss the mark, right? And so missing the mark, what I essentially understand that to be, is that we can go into the world and we can learn all about it. We can learn about the technicalities of computer systems. We can understand the mechanics of our body. We can become brilliant at making money. We can do all of this work in the external world. But if we don't turn that seeking and that search for truth inwards, we've missed the mark, right? And so really all we're saying is that in addition to everything else that you're doing, inquire into the nature of who am I? What am I? What is actually going on here? And that's the fundamental starting point, I think, for everyone else. And of course, it comes about through pain, right? And so that for me has been the fundamental driver in my life is I'm suffering, I'm in pain. There's chaos in my relationships. There's negative feelings inside me. This is not working. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling depressed. What is going on here? Why is this happening to me? And if you just keep
Yeah.
inquiring and keep inquiring and keep inquiring, you will stumble across this question: who am I? And that question, right, when you really focus on it, is the doorway to awakening. And I love this quote: a fool that persists in their folly will become wise. And that's all we are, is we're just fools who know nothing, and we're just stumbling around and we're trying things and running experiments and asking questions and testing things. And we eventually stumble across better and better truths to live by.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. I do love that. And I'm interested to see and hear from you kind of how your unique journey has been like a reflection of that. Because as you say, like we really, especially when we're young, especially when probably when we're teenage years, if we want to kind of look at, as when we're born, we're kind of pretty pure and pretty open to source and quite reflective of that. And then as we kind of, move forward through life, we get compounded by all sorts of, information that maybe doesn't necessarily hold us in our truest self. So I'm interested to hear how your journey through life has kind of reflected that. And obviously what you're speaking about right up front here now is very deep. It's like it's really mind expanding, which shows to me that you've obviously had a lot of experience in, coming within and really pondering and transmuting your experiences into wisdom. So I mean, let's go right back to the beginning. I'd love to go right back to as early as you want to go to. Like for Cian McEnroe, like what was it like growing up in your world? You said, your father was a leadership coach and a psychologist. Your mum was like into energy healing and a nurse, which is probably a bit, almost controversial for the times, which is a beautiful place to grow up. So I'm sure there was other sides to it, but please, wherever you want to take us, like start as early as you feel.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a lovely invitation. I think I'll start it by prefacing that when we look back on these experiences, we see the total utter perfection of them. And one of the truths that I've come to understand, at least from my understanding, is that every single moment is perfect in its totality at the absolute ultimate level. But in any one area, it's not perfect, it's imperfect. And so, from our limited human perspective, all of these things, on the face of things, they look like really hard, tough challenges, but actually they're perfect because they're part of that totality. And the totality itself is perfection itself. And they're also perfect for us to learn what we need to learn to grow and advance, which essentially means to expand our consciousness so we can perceive more of reality, more truth. And so that started for me with my parents and their parents, because those connections they're deeply important when we come to understanding the self-work. And whether or not you ascribe to the idea that you picked your parents or not, there can be no denying that your parents contain the lessons that you need to learn the most when you really reflect on it. And so when I was growing up, my father and my mother had just come back from, I think it was America, where dad had been working and trying to doing some consulting, and mum was trying to nurse, but she couldn't get a visa. And they both struggled a lot. It was a difficult time. Mum was pregnant and she was living in Daly City, which is in San Francisco, and she didn't have a lot of friends. And she had actually stepped on a needle or something, and she got a needle into her foot, I think, at one of the places she worked. And she was at home. Dad was out working. He didn't really know anyone. And so they were really they were struggling quite a lot there. Like a lot of Irish people who went overseas to find work, it can be quite difficult. And they came back to Ireland then whenever mum got pregnant to have me. And because they needed to build a house, they needed to get money, they moved into like a mobile home, like a caravan trailer in the front yard of dad's family's home. And so that's like a bit of a come to Jesus moment for my father, right? You've got a kid on the way. You're coming back to Ireland where you don't have many options or connections. You haven't built a career. He'd been in London. He'd been in America. He'd worked in the buildings in London. He'd done his MBA. And so he was just kind of finding himself and figuring out like, what am I actually going to do? And then you're living in a mobile home. You've got a kid on the way. You're living with in-laws. And there's the tensions of living with in-laws when you're and there was, he did not get on well with his father. There was not a good relationship there. Mum was a Presbyterian, which is a Protestant, which is the opposite of what my father was, which was Catholic. And so there were these just underlying tensions, right? And so none of the people in the scenario had any bad intentions. They're just like all of us, we're slaves to the way that we've been conditioned. And so we're unconsciously behaving in ways that are less than loving, because we don't have access to the love that we are because of the pain. And so they were in a difficult situation. And so I come into the world in this situation, and dad was building a house on the side. I was trying to then start get into consulting over there. And it was a stressful time. And they actually lived in my in-laws, in my granny and granddad's house for a while. And so there was tension there, and mum didn't want the baby to wake up, which was me, wake the house, right? There was also, she was constantly. And so when you look back on it now, you see like how the energetic states in which you were conceived, you were born, and which you grew up in impact your nervous system and then therefore everything else. And so I grew up taking on a lot of that fear. And a lot of that frustration, a lot of that anger, a lot of those lower states. And as the oldest, I was continuously the one who was the buffer for everyone else. You take on that role. And so my father has worked on himself, and my mother as well, immensely over the last 35 years, and to the point where that self-work that they've done has paid off, and they're now incredibly advanced, actually, in the way they are in their relationship and everything. It's been quite phenomenal. And we sort of went on that journey together. You know, I was the one who was the golden boy, supposed to take on the dad's business. I was growing up constantly talking about psychotherapy, psychology. Why were people depressed? Why were they anxious? Like, this was a very normal conversation for us. Whilst at the same time, getting all these ideas from my father and hearing about those things and hearing about the energy healing from my mother, and experiencing firsthand what ancestral trauma and conditioning looks like and feels like to experience it. Because you, on the one hand, you'd have my father, and he's talking about these ideas and how we can decondition ourselves and de-traumatize ourselves, whilst also doing it because he's traumatized himself, so he's trying to figure it all out, and he's working on it. He is collapsing back into some of unhelpful patterns. He's fighting with people. He's experienced a lot of anger, a lot of aggression, and fear himself. He's putting that out on everyone. Then we're taking that in. Then we're acting in those same ways. And so you're just slowly seeing the inculcation of all of this stuff happening in front of your eyes. But we had names for it. We had techniques to help with it. We had psychological understandings of it in the beginning, and then more spiritual understandings of it as that progressed. And so I was constantly learning how to grow and heal myself from a very young age, and being exposed to better and better ideas to do that. And so that for me was an incredible gift from both of my parents, because the biggest challenge we have right now on the planet is the level of human consciousness. And because we don't have very simple, clear tools to heal trauma, to understand who we really are, to relate to each other in better and better ways, we have no ways of really reliably making ourselves better in ways that matter. We have ways of doing it externally, achieving certain goals externally, but we don't have ways of doing it internally so much. And that's where we're waking up to. And so I feel like I perhaps got a little bit of a head start on that, and you take that for granted. But now, as I'm a little bit older, I can see how much it's actually shaped my own purpose and my own work that I do. And so I guess that's a little summary of how we of how we grew up and the sort of ideas and different things that we were exposed to. And so you have this big contrast between living in rural Ireland, where at the time a lot of people would never speak about psychology, depression, anxiety. It was like a tabooed subject. Yet we were fully speaking about it and constantly always talking about it. And so we had this big contrast of being very progressive in certain areas and learning, but yet still then going out into the community and experiencing a lot of those things firsthand, those things happening to us, and then trying to make sense of them. And I can see that that pain was perfect for me to then start to learn and heal, and the journey I'm on today, so that that becomes a gift now that I can actually give to and share and work with people. And so looking back now, it's all absolutely perfect and I wouldn't change it, but there were definitely some really difficult and challenging times.
Yeah. Yeah. When like, do you have any like age parameters or specific memories of that you'd like to share with us that were like, well, like things were just so intense and like, difficult in whatever way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, stuff like this would happen. So we played Gaelic football, which is a very common sport in Ireland, and it's very local based, community based. There's a lot of local pride on the line, and so you're really everyone's obsessed with how good you are at that game and how you did on the weekend, and it's quite a big thing. And my family was really big into that, and it's also tied up with a lot of um, it's got a lot of bearing on your self-worth, and the way that people traditionally motivate in that game is through a lot of fear-based stuff. And it's like there's a lot of judgment and criticism of those who play it. And so in order to be good at it, you have to be really fit. And so I remember my dad bringing me to athletics training when I was about 11 to get fitter, right? Because I was heavy, I was overweight as a child because I used to comfort eat a lot to get rid of my anxiety. So that was my escape, was comfort eating and reading fantasy novels. And so I would do that. But then, of course, because of that, I was eating my feelings, so I started to put on some weight. And I wasn't as mobile as the other kids. And so he brings me to athletics training, which was essentially just running, full on running. And this was my nightmare. I absolutely hated it. And so we're there one night, and I can't keep up with everyone. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm getting put into the slower group. I'm not wanting to do it. I'm getting a stitch and everything. And he just, for whatever reason at that time, he just could not handle this. I think it was like his own the judgment that he received for not being good at football, and all of these things were getting triggered in him. And he saw his poor son going through the same thing and just wants what's best for me. But he, on the way home in the car, like he absolutely read the riot act on me. He was screaming at me for being lazy, for being useless, for not being fit enough, for all this sort of stuff, for not trying. And so like I remember like almost to the point of like I'm scared now because of the intensity of this. And these sorts of verbal tirades were they're not every day around that, but they were commonplace. Like you knew that this way of disciplining, this way of motivating, this way of dealing with things that weren't working well was a very common thing. And it's a big hangover from the previous generation where there was a lot of physical violence. Like even in schools, people are getting hit for nothing. Right. So, and then at home, people are getting hit. And so if anything ever goes wrong, the response is just anger and the discipline is pain in a lot of these communities.
Yeah.
And so those sorts of things would happen. Or if I was lying in bed and I was being lazy, I might get pulled out of bed and kicked up the arse. You know what I mean? And like, so you're sleeping, you're snoozing, you're like, oh, it's so lovely. Like I'm a teenager. Next thing you know, like there's noise thundering up the stairs. You're getting pulled out of bed and you're just getting a bit of a kick. You know what I mean? And it's like, these things are normal, right? For for a lot of people in the way we grew up. And it's now we know, looking back on it all, where it comes from, and the poor people who are doing it are suffering so much, and there's worse been done to them. They don't have another map. Then the poor people who are suffering them are just getting, their nervous systems are getting conditioned in certain ways. And so these sorts of things, or you'd be at football games and you weren't be doing well, people would be shouting in from the sideline that you're useless. And these sorts of very hurtful things out of context would happen all of the time. So after a while of getting these, you then of course start to do it to yourself. You start to shout to yourself, oh, it's like, oh, for God's sake, you know what I mean? Like, blah, 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 and you're shouting yourself on the pitch, and then you're beating yourself up for not doing well enough. You're comparing yourself to others constantly. You're judging yourself ferociously. And the sum total of it all is you drop out of your heart. You're not able to remain in your heart. And the love, the unconditional love of which is our birthright, is continuously denied to us. And we can't access it inside ourselves. And once we can't access inside ourselves, and we're looking for it externally, but you're getting this conditional love, you're getting this conditional stuff. When you do well, it's like all good. Then when you do well, it's like, when you do badly, it's like you're getting absolutely hammered. And so in that way, you end up internalizing a lot of those things, and that becomes your level of motivation. And it's a dirty fuel. It's a dirty fuel. And that led to me developing a number of really difficult to shift eating disorders when I was about 17 or 18, going to college, and getting really into the gym and getting body dysmorphic disorder, which is where you look at yourself basically and all you can see are the flaws. Or bigorexia, it's called for men, really. It's like where you look at yourself and you can never be big enough. Also a little bit of orthorexia nervosa, which is where you start to imagine that certain foods are clean and pure. And so you have these lists of pure foods, and then you have a list of dirty foods. And so then your list of pure foods start to become smaller and smaller and smaller, and then you're restricting, and you only feel clean, you feel good whenever you're eating certain ways. And if you eat some of this on the naughty list, right, then you're a piece of shit and your world is over. And so like these obsessive, compulsive elements that are linked to underlying anxiety can be really, really difficult to shift. And so they were the big fuel for me, actually, after when I got to about 23 or 24, to really start working on myself using the ideas I'd learned in my psychotherapy degree and in my psychotherapy postgrad. And that was when I started to really seek intensely, because I was like, I can't live with this anymore. I can't live with these feelings of anxiety, these feelings of pain anymore. I must be free of them. I don't care what the price is. And so that was the start for me of really starting to take intellectual ideas, which I'd learned, and spiritual ideas, which I've been learning about, and just go, no, this has to, if all this is even remotely true, then I have to start applying it to myself, because I know that where I'm at is absolutely nowhere in comparison to what's possible of how good life can be.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. And so it sounds like coming through your teenage years was like very challenging, to the point where then, moving into university and kind of stepping into the world as a young adult, like you were really battling against like your own like upwellings of the byproducts of essentially the trauma, presenting as anxiety for you, which, yeah, it's such a wow, a difficult time, especially when you've had those compression points, those pain points of like judgment and shaming and comparison and fear, and whoa, it's like it's really very difficult to feel good about yourself, right?
It is. And the problem is this: you don't know what it feels like to feel good about yourself. You don't actually know. It's like you've lived your whole life ill, and someone asks you, what does health feel like? You don't actually know how good it can be. You only know what you've experienced. And so what you've experienced is temporary reprieve from suffering. And those temporary reprieves, which often come in the form of drugs, actually, can be enough for you to go, wait a minute, there's a different place for me to live from. Different states of consciousness are possible. And then, I mean, I want to just say that I had lots of incredible experiences, of course. I grew up in a very loving family. The vast majority of it was love, right? You know what I mean? And I'm very privileged. We had money. I'm going to university. I'm having great times with friends. We're going out. It's like it is. I'm by no means saying I grew up in a traumatic experience. What I am saying, though, is that even in all of the great stuff, and no matter how good your life is, there are always these things that happen to us, and they're meant to happen to us. They're meant to give us enough pain so that we start to seek. And there are unique trauma or unique little bits of conditioning. And so all I'm doing here is I'm articulating, I'm narrating some of those pieces, and then how they started to teach me how to learn, pretty much. And so then once I actually started to get into doing some healing work, I remember going to Toronto for a summer, and it was like maybe we were 19, and it was the first time we were so we were out at this nightclub one night, and it was the first time we'd ever discovered MDMA, right? And the first time you ever do MDMA, for anyone who's ever done MDMA, is like suddenly the lights come on in your world. You're like, how is this a place that's possible in the human experience that I have never been to? What is this? Right? Drinking alcohol is one thing. You kind of feel a bit good. You feel a bit fuzzy. It's nice dissociation. Your problems go away for a little while. That's interesting in itself, because then you go, wait a minute, my problems can actually temporarily go away. Right? So there is a place where no problems exist. But MDMA is like an explosion, an energetic explosion of suddenly you're like, you are on top of the world. Like you're just invincible. It's like everything is amazing. Everything's amazing. And so we were at this nightclub one night, and there was a guy, and he was absolutely off his face. He was falling on the floor, and I went over to him and picked him up, and I was like, hey mate, like, how you doing? Whatever. He was like, because I'm on this massive love buzz, so I pick him up, and his eyes are rolling all over the place, and I'm like, this guy he's all sorts of out of it. And he goes, oh, what are you taking tonight, man? I was like, I'm taking some Molly, which is what they call MDMA over there. And he goes, oh, Molly. He goes, do you want some? And I was like, yeah. And then he goes, and he takes, you're never going to say no, he takes out, I'm not messing now, a bag of huge MDMA tablets. I mean, there's probably about, I'm not going to exaggerate, maybe 30 to 40, which would be double caps, probably about 0.4 of a gram. And he gives them to me. And I just go, and then of course I'm 19, and I'm like, I've never seen this many drugs before. And I'm sort of like, okay, he's kind of out of it. I was like, I don't know if he even remembers giving them to me. And then I'm just going to get up, walk away. And he's like saying nothing. I'm like, all right, here's all our drugs for the summer. Do you know what I mean? So I get my friend and I go, right? And so obviously a horrible act. Do you know what I mean? Like an act of pure thievery, right? And because I'm absolutely off my face, and I'm just like, yeah, free drugs. And so we leave, and so we have these drugs for the summer. So we've all this MDMA for the summer. And what the MDMA taught me was that love is a state that's accessible now. I'm using this drug now, but ultimately the drug is only putting this into me. It's using what's inside me to create this experience. And so that started to help me a lot to understand that. And then my deconditioning work, my trauma work, started to really help. I started to work on myself a lot and start to heal some of these traumatic memories. And then eventually, as I kept working on those things, I started to uncover more and more different spiritual truths. The healing for me was the modality where I started, but then that led me to the whole question of enlightenment and awakening, and the question of who am I? So I actually entered through the healing route. And I know there's many ways to enter, but that for me was the point, because I started to feel better, and I started to ask, well, how good can it be? And that led me to the spirituality aspect of it proper.
So what age was that? Was obviously you had that experience at 19, and then through the summer, free drugs at 19, having lots of fun, bit of out of integrity, but we won't go there. So kind of was that from that time, that kind of leaning into or
Yeah,
expressing out of
yeah,
that?
it really and just on your point, yeah, that's absolutely out of integrity. Do you know what I mean? But we can only be as in integrity as we're capable of being in the moment. And at that time, I was full of trauma and riddled with. So I was like, so the whole idea, it's interesting because the whole idea of ethics, right, is quite an interesting conversation where people, we believe that we're rational beings and that we hold people to some sort of ethical standard, but we can only be as ethical as we've earned the right to be in the moment. And at that stage, I was living with so many lies, so many untruths in my own life that to steal those drugs off somebody was not a stretch at all. You know, I'm lying to myself. I'm like, I grew up learning how to lie to parents, lie to other people's parents, like do all these sorts of things, and I was telling white lies continuously. And I just realized at a certain point a number of years ago that I have been telling so many white lies in my life, and I actually felt that I was on the right side morally to not really say how I truly felt. And so those sorts of acts of out of integrity, when you really examine them, they come from fear. They come from anger. They come from these lower states. And so we judge people so harshly for those things without realizing that if we were in their position and we had the same experience as them, we would do the exact same. And it only starts when we start being truthful with ourselves, then we can really then start to get into integrity. But I was nowhere near that yet. And that for me only started to really kick in. I would say my seeking really intensified about 4 years ago. So I'm 33 now, 29. Up until that point, I was working, I was meditating a bit, I was doing deconditioning work, trauma work. I was very much in the psychological world, and I was intellectually spiritual. And
Yeah.
but my spiritual practice really kicked off, and it wasn't like there was one particular moment. It was just that over time, what happened over those sort of 6 or 7 years, what happened was I found myself just more and more drawn to it, more and more, just more and more reading spiritual texts, more and more practicing meditation, more until it became something that I just had to do. It wasn't a choice. It was like, I must do this. I must understand this. And I found that the obsessional qualities that I had cultivated during my eating disorder days and during my exercise days and all of those things suddenly found a target that was not um, a target that was actually useful. And so when I started to meditate, and I started to initially with the practice of just anchoring on the breath, and then I started with the Advaita Vedanta practices of turning attention back on itself to look for the source of attention, to look for the I. And so I would sit and I would just inquire, and I would literally, you sit, eyes closed, and you are just concentrating on the breath, concentrating on the breath, and then at the snap of a finger, you turn attention back on itself, and you inquire, where is this I that seems to be behind my eyes? Where are they? I should be able to find them. And you keep doing that, and you keep doing that until what happens is you cannot find it. You cannot find an I anywhere. And when you drop back into that space, all that appears is this open spaciousness. And you start to realize that the open spaciousness is where all of the contents of consciousness are actually appearing. So you go the same space. When I turn attention back in itself, I enter into the recognition that I am a space in which thoughts, emotions, sensations, sounds, all of it's arising and it's instantly being known, but in this space. And so eventually, after intellectual understanding and practice and practice and practice, you start to experientially understand, you understand that I am the space, not any of the sensations. And then this is why it's such a freedom, this practice, because in the psychological realm where I had lived, it was all about arranging the contents of consciousness in such a way that I would feel okay. And so that's beautiful. I think that's an incredible place to be. But once you've achieved stability there, you realize all of the contents of consciousness, my life, the sensations, all of these things, the people, the relationships, all of it's really good. I have enough money. I have enough respect. I can earn money. I can work. I have enough skills. I have enough control in my life. I have good relationships. I have everything that you psychologically need in order to be mentally healthy. But still, I am miserable. Still, I am wooden. Still, I am suffering. Still, it's all so temporary. And I should feel so much better than that after all this work, after 10 years of psychotherapy. And I love psychotherapy, and I involve some of those skills in my practice, but we've had it for the last 110, 120 years. Has it actually created more mental health? Is an interesting question, right? Has it actually created the conditions for more people to thrive and really be at their best? Now, I think psychotherapy gets you to a certain stable platform. But from that stable platform where your ego, your personality is stable, then spirituality comes in and says, hey, you know, that control that you've been working hard to achieve, you know, that status that you now have as your job and the skills, do you know that security that you now feel because of the money you have in the bank? Well, ultimately, that is an illusion. And your understanding of those psychological needs to evolve. It needs to evolve in order for you to go to the next level. We want to use levels. And so after doing that work for a long enough time, what I realized was I was never going to get to where I wanted to go, where my heart truly wanted to go through that model. It was always limited because no matter how much security, control, and status I amassed, no matter how many relationships I amassed, no matter how psychologically safe I felt, it was always temporary. And it would always wake up every morning and it would be at zero again. I'd have to go and I'd have to get it to 100 before the end of the day.
Super interesting, mate. And I think like rewinding right back to the beginning where you were talking about, working with people to find their purpose, and like I think that's pivotal. And I almost saw it when you were talking like the psychotherapy or like the psychology or whatever it is a part of the loop. It's like the first part of the figure eight or the infinity sign, but like without that spirituality conjoining to it, converging with it, it's just like a missing piece of the puzzle of you, and I've loved that, and I love like my own kind of inquiry into spirituality is really just spirituality is just what science hasn't caught up with yet, but they're the same thing. Like everything's quantifiable once we get to that level of understanding, but as you say, we're wandering around like with such a limited view of mathematics or the truth or God, source, divine. And I just, yeah, I love what you're talking about. I think it's really fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing from such a deep level, especially from such a young age. And I found it interesting when you were saying you really got into this about 4 years ago, which is 29, which is like right in the middle of your Saturn return. It kind of makes a lot of sense, like at that point where we're questioning everything and where it's really a pivotal point in who we start to become. I really think 30 is when we start to be adults.
Yeah, it's a really
So
sorry, yeah, it's a very
yeah,
interesting observation about when do these things happen. And I think for different people they'll have different experiences. I think the whole area of astrology and these cycles, and that was never an area that I came from, never a background that I came from. And so I can't really comment on the validity of that. There are people who are incredibly skilled in that, and I know enough about it to know that there's something going on there, and I don't understand. But when I sit back and observe now where I am now at 33, I see the intensification, and I see how everything that's happened up to my life now has helped me to get to this moment here. And where I go to from here, I don't know. But this pivotal point for me has coincided with the meeting of Miles Trainer and his work on the soul alignment method, because up until this point, I think like a lot of seekers, I was going around and I'm just testing and seeing what works for me. And I'm kind of YouTubing and I'm reading books. Like I had a mentor in Ireland, a man called Joe Griffin, who is one of the most brilliant psychologists and also spiritual teachers of our time, but a quiet spiritual teacher. He's had deeply profound mystical experiences, which he writes about, but he doesn't seek students. He doesn't seek, he is purely of the perspective that if there's a cosmic plan for his work to go to people, it will happen. It's inevitable. But he had some extremely deep experiences, one of which was, it's well known in the Sufi tradition, not so talked about often in spiritual worlds. But it's the experience of becoming the observer of the universe in its totality as it comes into being in each moment, right? And so this in the Sufi tradition is called as becoming the perfect man or the perfect person. And basically working with him and working with my father, he introduced me to the spiritual dimension, and listening to him and hearing him speak, it was like when you meet someone who has what you want, right? You just meet them and they're not fazed by situations that would destroy you with anxiety. They're living in such a way, their energetic frequency is such a level that you just know intuitively that you want to be there. And he really helped me. And he helped my father a lot as well. And my father has helped me a lot as well. They've all been teachers to me. But he helped me to really understand that spirituality is a very practical, necessary thing for life. And it's a practical, necessary thing for the universe. So in a nutshell, his theory is this, that the universe exists, right? And impartly, it must create a self-conscious being who has the ability to be born unaware and achieve enlightenment, becoming aware of itself through experiences to such a degree that it can then turn that self-awareness back on the universe itself and become the observer of the universe coming into being in each moment. Right? And so essentially, he had this experience where he completely surrendered his life, and he was in a very difficult financial situation. He completely surrendered his life. He gave it all up to God. And in that moment, he felt an extremely hot sensation on the back of his hand. And he thought it was the sunlight actually on the back of his hand, but it wouldn't go away when he covered it. So he went home and he meditated. And instantly, he found his body completely transformed. And he said he felt like he could feel absolutely everything on his body all at once at the same time, like the coolness of his eyelids. And his consciousness had expanded like a donut ring, like a torus shaped in all directions, far beyond his senses. It's just expanded. So his sense of himself had expanded limitedly in all directions. And he could still feel the human impulses and different things, but they were very much muted and insignificant. And he walked around in that state for a number of days. But as he was in that state, he had this experience where in front of him appeared a beach ball sized, almost like a jigsaw puzzle, but a beach ball sized of 3D. And it would be moving and shifting. And then he was intensely aware of a point of awareness at his navel, a very small, dimensionless, intense point of awareness. And that point of awareness traveled into this beach ball and intuitively, instantly knew that these pieces could fit together and become a unity. And as soon as he had that intuitive knowing, the beach ball came together into one beautiful unity, and then boom, it dropped away, and it was left just a feeling of bliss, of complete bliss. And then another beach ball would come, right? And then again, same thing, point of awareness. And then he would go into the point of awareness, and then it would become a unity, drop down, instant bliss, and then back to becoming a big torus of awareness in which he was aware of everything. And so he kept having this experience, and he was like, what is going on here? Do you know what I mean? He really, and so he spent the next sort of 10 years trying to make sense of that. And he writes about in his book, A Universe That Dreams. And he essentially has come to the understanding that the universe is coming into being from a place, an unmanifested place, right? A place beyond time and space in every moment. But like a holographic frame, a slice of the universe is being projected into our reality. And a self-conscious being of enough spiritual advancement to die to their ego has to be there to meet it, to observe it coming into place. And as it observes it coming into place, it realizes that it is also that. And it goes into it and merges with it completely and experiences intense bliss. And so this is like how the Hindus describe the nature of reality or God. It's like Sat, Chit, Ananda. Existence, consciousness, bliss. So Sat is existence, right? There's something coming into being. Chit is consciousness or knowledge, which means that there's a self-aware consciousness that's aware of it. And then there's Ananda, which is bliss. And so these three factors make up the one. And it's how it manifests into our reality. And so this is his experience and his theory, which I'm trying to intellectually share, because I haven't experienced, but he had, and he writes about it in his book. And so when he starts talking about these experiences, I become fascinated by what he's actually describing. Like the idea that human beings are necessary for the universe to be even in existence, that there must be an observer in order for existence to really exist. So existence is aware of itself. And so these sorts of things I was being exposed to, plus all the work he was doing on himself to clean out the conditioning to get to the point where he could have these experiences that many people have had and written about over the years. And he then inspired me to keep taking it to the next level because I wanted what he had. And then when I met Miles, what Miles has done is pulled all of these different ideas from spirituality, psychology, conscious relating into one coherent pattern. And for me, that was really powerful because I was just searching around for lots of different things and trying to put them together and kind of stumbling around in the dark. But he came with a really clear pattern and said, this is how it all fits. Phase one is about awakening experiences, awakening to the true nature of me. Phase two is about healing, doing the work to keep staying in that place and clearing out conditioning. Phase three is about finding purpose, because when you're in this space, you realize that even though at the ultimate level you are God, God is experiencing itself through you at the human level. And there are just ways that God wants to experience itself through you. And if you align with those, that is purpose. And there are things that are more purposeful and less purposeful. And then conscious relating is phase four, how you use relationships as a mirror, as you just described earlier. And then phase five is community. How do you build and align yourself with people who are like-minded and be truthful and really follow those through? And so between these two main teachers, both Irish actually, and my father all the time, I have just been inspired and given enough methods and enough tools so that I've been able to be efficient in the work more and more. And so I'm extremely grateful for those. But it's just the fact that there are people having these sorts of experiences which are beyond what science can explain, and that there always have been mystics having these experiences. And when you speak and listen to those mystics, they say the same thing in different language and in different ways. And there's something real for us to do from a spiritual level that matters for the universe itself, for me is a very heartening and positive message. And it's realizing that each of us has a role to play, and we're being given in every moment the fuel to learn and the fuel to grow and the lessons we need to awaken and embody that awakening in this experience. And everything is a mirror to us. And when you start to see the world in this way, suddenly life becomes this incredibly powerful, beautiful experience, even the hard stuff. And it becomes this game that you're playing, but it's a game that's so deeply meaningful because everything is dripping with meaning. And so that kind of, those are the people who've really influenced my spiritual quest and continues to do so. And I'm just as committed as possible to being the most full expression of myself, because I know that ultimately that's all we can do in this experience. And we don't actually get to set the plan. We just get to participate in it as fully as possible, in my understanding.
Yeah, just a lot of head nodding from me, and just loving like everything that you're sharing, and obviously the depth of those mentors like were sound so inspiring. Like even just, having that expanded viewpoint of the world to move towards, to have like as a reference point, like obviously has impacted you at such a young age, and has got you on this path for yourself already. And I just love so much of what you were talking about there. It just resonates with me so deeply. So I'm really looking forward to to getting this out there, because I think more and more people need to hear this. More and more people need to have those mentors, those teachers show up, because there is a plan that we're a part of. And then when we start to realize that, it shows up for us and we see it. A lot of time we miss it when we're still not in that alignment of vibration, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. So I'm also really keen to kind of ask you, like, where were the major turning points for you? What were like the pain points to purpose points in your life where you were like, yeah, this is big, this is where I'm going, and this is why.
Yeah. So for me, when you look back on it now, right, what I've come to understand through the soul alignment method is that it is our purpose blueprint, if you want to call it that, our soul's purpose blueprint is actually understandable when you look back. And what you need to look for is in your experience now, when you get really quiet and you meditate and you go inside and you go beyond the mind and you get into the space of awareness. If you really close your eyes and investigate, particularly the space above your head, you will notice that there is a light. There's an energetic light. There's a sense of lightness, expansiveness. We talk about this in spiritual circles as the crown chakra, divine consciousness coming in to the chakra system. But there is a light, a light that is the source of everything. And so you might experience it as an actual physical light. You might actually feel it. You might feel it as an energetic light. But when you get into that state, that what Miles would call the alignment state, you are closer to your true nature. You are closer to home, right? And as Joe Griffin would call it, it's like this is the unmanifested coming into the manifested, right? It's the ultimate supreme coming into this human experience. And many different mystical traditions have experienced it as a light. It's most talked about in Christianity, like Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, the light." And what he actually means is that like the light itself is God in this experience. And so when you get into that state and when you're really quiet, you can be aware of the space, right? The space in which all is happening. But actually, in addition to that, there is a sense of lightness, a sense of expansiveness. And if you just bring your awareness up above the head, into the space above the head, and go up into that light and call it down into your body, what you will notice is that that light is guiding you if you listen. Because in certain situations, when you go in, things are either heavy or they're light. It's a spectrum. And so relationships are easy. If you go in, you just really bring in someone to mind here now that you really don't get on with, right? Feel the heaviness in the system. When if you go and talk to and think about someone who you love to hang around, really, really expands you, really lights you up, right? That person is closer to the light for you. And so you can organize your entire reality around what is the lightest way possible. Or we could use the word purpose. What's the most purposeful thing possible? And so when you go into that space and you truly ask yourself, or someone else asks you, and I do this work with people now, is like, what really lights you up? They know intuitively, right? They know. And those things, they could be something like, well, I just love like authenticity. I love when people are free to be themselves, and it's like they can just be as weird as they want, and they can laugh and they can do whatever they want, and it's vibrant, right? You go, okay, so an element of what your soul is here to experience is this realness, this authenticity. Now, why is your soul so motivated to experience that? And then you look back and you start to see that there's a lot of pain in this person's life around authenticity. So maybe they were subdued. Like, so let's say for me growing up in countryside Ireland, where like you couldn't really be that weird, you know what I mean? There was a little bandwidth of weird you could be. There was a little bandwidth where you could talk about, but ultimately there isn't a huge appetite for weird ideas or crazy ideas or getting really real and really vulnerable, right? And so that hurts you growing up, and you're like, I just can't be myself. I have to lie to people. I have to tell them what they want to hear, blah, blah, blah. And so your human self gets the pain that's needed. And then as soon as you work on that pain, right, you start to get the gift, which is the ability to be authentic. You go through it, you go, actually, with all that conditioning and all that crap, I've become stronger than that. And now I can start a podcast where I talk about whatever it is, how weird it is. I don't mind. We speak about it, and it's okay what other people think, and they go, oh, that person's gone crazy, right? Which I have thought of other people in the past. But you can see so clearly that your pain and trauma flipped becomes your purpose, your gift. And so when I look back on my life, I see many different, maybe 4 or 5 big ones. One is about transformation. So the idea that you can transform and grow and learn, and you will heal and you will get better, and life does go on, and you can become that highest version of yourself, for me, lights me up massively. And that's why I do the work that I do. Because when I was growing up, there was this whole thing of, oh, you know, oh, it's all just fucked. Oh, no, it'll never go. Oh, that one. Sure, you know what happened there. You know, it's like, oh, and then the hip is gone, and oh, it's all so bad. And then they broke their back. It's like, oh, it's so. And it was always like, this person is broken and always will be. There's no hope of transformation. But as I came through some of that and started to learn, and even just learning how to get in shape, learning how to heal my own trauma, I suddenly was like, wow, I'm getting more and more power around this whole layer of transformation. And then as I be that as much as I possibly can, others are attracted to come into that. And so really the purpose is just to be fully yourself. And then whatever's needed will be attracted to you. And so transformation is a big one for me. You know, the freedom to be yourself, realness, that lights me up in the world. Another thing that I've done work on as part of my blueprint is, interesting enough, is water, being around water, being in the ocean, playing in the waves, right? All of these things that really lights me up. And so there are a number of these purpose elements that come out, and then you can start to align your life to them. And that's currently where I am in my current journey, is aligning my life to these new understandings. You know, it's like, well, there are certain relationships where it really lights me up, where, like, say, Tim, meeting you and being able to talk about all this stuff and being free and being listened to and being loved for who I am now becomes a sort of standard in my relationships. And it becomes an expression. Like, I want to be in relationship with people who see me, who really see me, who receive me, who celebrate me, right? Who love me for who I am. They see me in my genius, right? And so that comes from wounds then of growing up with people who didn't get me, you know, and who I couldn't be myself around, or being bullied, and so again, you see this beautiful arc of wound to gift if we do the work and if we get the lessons. And so that is how I understand, like, how to really start embodying the spiritual work on a human level, is by just taking what really lights us up on a soul, from a soul perspective, how God is guiding us, and bringing it down into the human experience, and then doing the psychological work, doing the maths on it, doing the finances, doing the goal setting, doing all this sort of stuff, and embodying it more and more and more. And it's an ongoing process, because every single day, this morning I sat down to do a piece of work on trauma where I'm getting super triggered because I go to do renovations in my bathroom and I lose it completely. I lose all connection to myself. I get busy, I get rushed, I get panicked, I start running around, I lose my shit, I keep putting stuff everywhere, I keep judging myself and beating myself up, I'm getting frustrated. And that just becomes another area of work. It's like, why? Why is that so triggering? And then go back into my ancestral work, go back into that. I learn the lessons. There's another little piece of the puzzle. And then I say, how do I want to be in that situation? What's the lightest version of myself, possibly when it comes to doing house renovations? And I seek to embody that more and more. And so it's like this every single day, every single moment. Am I staying in the light? Am I doing the lightest version possible? And then when I drop, can I just get back there, or do I need to really do some deeper work to get back there? But I'm always trying to get back there. And that's why I said the obsessional qualities that come into that can be really unhelpful when it comes to eating disorders are actually really powerful in the spiritual world, because the spiritual work must become the highest thing that you're doing. Like in the Bible, it says, thou shalt have no other gods above me. So as soon as you have another god, money, status, power, then spiritual work can't work, because always you'll be looking to prioritize that unconsciously over what's actually happening now and surrendering into the moment.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you on that final point, just about the spirituality side of things. And I feel like the purpose part of it really is a spiritual calling for me anyway, from my own experience of like deeply connecting to a succinct, clear purpose that has been completely our focus since that came into our field, dropped into our field very clearly. It hasn't changed. It's evolved. It has not changed. And it is that guiding star that is constantly propelling us forward, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the challenges and whatever else. It's like, well, we will do that work regardless, and we've always been supported and always been divinely guided. But I also love the vulnerability in that, like, yeah, every day, every week, there's something that comes up where we're like, hey, this is me not being ideally who I say that I am in the world. And like, what's the next inquiry? Like, what's really going on here? And there's the choice points and awareness and the work that is involved in that. And it's challenging, right? It's like not easy to confront that part of yourself and have your partner going, why he's just like, why is he losing his shit over there? You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
mean,
But
you
that's the
see,
work.
the funny thing about this is that there are so many paradoxes. Right? The truth is almost always in paradox. And I think a lot of people trip over the paradoxes. And like some of the ones that come out is like, well, there is no purpose to everything. There's no purpose to anything really, because, God's doing it all. And to even look for purpose is an egoic pursuit. And then you go, okay, so ultimately, yes, right? It's all a divine plan. This is my understanding. And that we all have our destinies and we're all working out. And ultimately, everything is meaningful. Nothing is more or less meaningful than anything else. And yet, when you observe yourself, right? When you observe yourself and surrender to this divine plan, what you notice is that you are placed in specific places with specific relationships. And there is this nature of resonance. You are guided by what lights you up versus what feels heavy. And so both are true, right? Ultimately, there's no purpose because everything is purposeful. But yet, when you surrender to that idea, you realize that there are unique ways in which you are being positioned, relationships, career, lifestyle, location, physical health, all those things, that when you surrender, they happen to you, and you can't stop them happening. And so all we're doing is we're observing those things and saying that's actually the purpose blueprint. And we're just using the word purpose here, um, for want of a better word, maybe. But it's like when the universe plays me, how does it play me? Like I'm an instrument, right? What are the notes that it hits? And so whether or not you want to say, oh, there's no purpose or there is purpose, whatever, it doesn't actually matter, because all you need to do is observe reality and see in what way is it actually unfolding, what works. So again, if you just keep coming back to truth and really trying to experience what works, you cut through a lot of these paradoxes. And another one is that the most spiritually advanced people are often the most messed up, right? And you know, when I was doing psychology, I realized that the vast majority of our psychology students are there because we're figuring out what's wrong with me, right? You know, the vast majority, most psychologists you meet are the most neurotic people you'll ever meet, because they've been had enough pain in their lives to have to search into their own psychology. So spirituality is like, we've had enough pain in our lives and misery to actually say, do you know what? I need a different way, right? And so you'll end up having, like, I remember, like, just having these sorts of conversations with people when they're like, well, how can you talk about spirituality whenever, you know, you have this problem, right? And you say, well, it's not about being a perfect human. It's about continuously seeking after truth. And so you will, on the spiritual path, you'll have these incredibly high experiences, incredibly difficult experiences. And ultimately, it's all perfect because it's part of the divine plan. But yet there's a lot of work to do at the same time, you know. And so what we're really working on here is just trying our very best to map it out and to find out ways that work. You know, like you do some beautiful work on sound healing, breath work, all these modalities around healing. They help us on this journey, right? You know, they work. They help people tap into different levels of consciousness. And so all we're trying to do is actually bring people to the light. We're trying to say, hey, the light's doing it all, God's doing it all, but we're trying to connect you to that so that you can get your direction a little bit more clearly. And we're just trying to do it as well. So when I work with people now, it's like, they're like, oh, I've got such a tough decision to make. It's so hard. It's like, what am I going to do? And like, rather going into the psychological realm of like questioning, I'll say, close your eyes, get really quiet, go inside, go deep. And from that place, connect to the light and now ask your question. And then the answer just comes, bang. Right. And then once it comes, then you just go and you follow that and you see where you see that leads you. And so all of it is useful, all of these different techniques, these different psychological techniques, but it's just, what is the most efficient, what's the most useful thing for this person in front of me right now, and for me right now in my journey. And it's an ongoing journey. Like, we have no idea what people like the Buddha or Christ, how they viewed the world. Like, what was their experience like? We're trying to get closer to that, but we can only see what we can see, you know? We're looking here, and then we look at ourselves 10 years ago and we go, this person could see very little of reality, but now we can see so much more. And now I'm excited for what's 10 years' time, what's 15 years' time, and safe in the knowledge that it's all perfect anyway. We can never fall out of love, because ultimately we are all love at the ultimate level. But yet at this human level and at this soul level, we're all involved in this cool game. And so let's continue to play it. And the more we get involved in this game and the more we meet people who are involved in it, the more we get lit up, the better life gets. And you're just like, why would you not have the most fun, most expansive life that you possibly could in this lifetime when you start to learn that that's what it's about?
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, it is a game. It really is a game. And I love the, you know, talking to the soul versus the human element of it, which is, it can be very hard for people to grasp, right? It's like the human experience can be like very challenging and very in your face from the soul perspective, like, depending on what your beliefs are. My beliefs seem to align quite closely with yours, is that like everything is learning. There are no mistakes. There's nothing that we can do that's off path. We are on path. We are on the journey. Like, we are the divine expressing itself, expressing itself. It's a wildly kind of beautiful experience to dip into, because as you say, it turns all of the pain into purpose. it has that transitional element to it, as you said, like taking this obsession element from the OCD and almost the eating disorder, and then turning into like obsession over here in this very healthy and expansive realm. It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
perfect. And then in the moment as a human, you're like, help me. This is not
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. And you know, the belief system, right, is an interesting one. You know, we have the same beliefs. It's like at a certain point, you're moving beyond beliefs, because if you keep seeking, if you just keep honestly seeking after truth, if you just go, you know, I don't care what my ego wants to believe. I'm just constant. I'm just going to seek for what actually works. Right. Let's define truth very simply.
Yeah.
What works? Because reality is the ultimate judge. Reality will show you whether or not you're in alignment with what works or what doesn't. So if I, in this current reality, jump off a building and I go, you know, gravity's not going to affect me, I can fly, bang, you'll hit the ground, right? I think the same is true for our inner world. There are internal laws that are much more subtle and harder to understand, but if you really seek them, they're there. And it's not about belief at a certain point, it's about experience. You're like, oh no, I know that this is true. So, for example, trauma is something that people didn't really believe in. They were like, oh, but trauma, no, it's like people are fine, it's no issue, like everyone's a rational being, like trauma doesn't really affect people, trauma doesn't affect children, like no, people are just clean slates, they come. It's like all of those old ideas from the psychological have just been completely blown out of the water, because enough people have sought truth, enough people have said, wait a minute, there are implicit, which means below the level of conscious awareness, memories stored in my nervous system, which my human self is perceiving reality through this lens, and it's creating suffering and pain. When I go in and I close my eyes and I go inside and I inquire and I really listen, and I express those. Maybe I go back and I do a technique where I go into the memory and I replay the memory in a safe environment using it like the rewind technique, or whether I go back, I do somatic feeling, I feel it in the body and I bring love to it and I allow it to come up. And then maybe I bring some ancestors in there if I'm able to do that skill. And then I listen to them and I feel what they're feeling and I express. And then I learn the lesson and then I start to let it go and I bring in more lightness, I bring in more love. When I do that, then in 5 years' time, the same situation does not trigger me. It just doesn't trigger me. Or I used to be afraid of needles and now I can get needles in my arm. Or I used to be afraid of dogs and now I'm not. That is just true. It's not a belief. There's trauma, there's not trauma. This is true. And so all the great masters go, belief is interesting, but I don't believe this. I know it. And so that's the whole point now, is about we just forget about this crowd over here believes this crowd over here believes that, they believe in other beings, they believe in that. It's like, okay, no, let's get into my own experience. What is it that I experience as fundamentally true? What works for me, right? Does it make me a kinder, more joyful person? Am I less triggered by things? I remember Joe Griffin said to me one day, he goes, you know, what is real? He was like, what can be guaranteed and what can no one ever take away from you is that you can now go into a situation, keep your heart open and be loving and accepting of what happens, when you used to be closed and fight, right? And so that's the acid test, really, is your state of being in every moment. And so all we can really know is our state of being, that we are aware. And then what is the nature of that awareness? And so the acid test is I go in and am I able to stay in an open, spacious place? Am I able to stay closer to the light in soul alignment terms? Is the light coming into my experience? Do I feel light and expansive? Am I able to hear someone say something that really triggered me? Observe the emotion that comes up, let it go. Or maybe nothing comes up now because I've done the work. And are my relationships improving? Is my life more harmonious? Right? Am I being kinder to people? Am I sleeping better? Is my nervous system calmer? right? Am I able to navigate more and more difficult challenges? Can I do more things with skill, right? Can I surrender more? All of these things are very tangible, very practical things that you must test yourself on continuously. And that's why every single day, life is ultimately the best teacher, because it's constantly showing you, if you're willing to look, how you're doing. And so it doesn't actually matter about what you say. It doesn't matter about like the crystals, the rituals, the ceremonies, the all the different things. What really matters, the acid test, is like in those moments where you used to go to a lower place, can you stay in a higher place? And then if you do drop down, can you love yourself anyway? And go, wow, this is a lesson, and I forgive myself, and I go forward. So it's spirituality is like the most practical thing in the world, and it's a daily practice continuously.
Yeah.
So that's what really lights me up about it, is because it says in Corinthians 1, it's like if I it's Corinthians 1:13, it's like if I speak in the tongues of angels and of men but have not love, then I am just a cymbal or a clashing gong, right? And so ultimately, and that's a paraphrase, it's not the exact phrase, but it's that idea, that understanding that if we cannot stay connected and be as our true nature, which is kind, loving awareness, um, in each moment, then there's work to do. And that work, no matter what
Yeah.
tool, there's more and more efficient tools that you can learn and use as you become a better seeker. But ultimately, no matter what tool you're using, is it helping you to be there more and more? And whatever way that's working for you and what's happening for you is perfect for you. It's like one of the things I'm working on now is fall in love with your own destiny, fall in love with your own life. If one person knows you, or if a million people know you, then fall in love with exactly what you are here to experience. Like your soul, speaking directly to your soul now. What if this human that you are in right now was exactly what you always wanted? What if this was exactly what you needed, exactly what you always dreamed of? And yet, on this human level, we're like, oh God, I'm not as good as Tim. I haven't done all these different things. Like, I'm not as good as this person. No, it's like, oh, that person has this many followers. It's like there's a much bigger game going on. And I say this as a reminder to myself, above all else, is to fall in love with yourself and with your own destiny. And then from that place, then you can act in the world. And you can combine these two beautiful elements of spirituality, which is the feminine aspect, the loving aspect, and the masculine aspect, which is the purpose, the truth, the kind of the directional aspect. You bring those two together like Christ did, and you walk and embody that light and that love in every single day and every moment. And when you fall from that, you love yourself, forgive yourself, and you attempt to come back from that. You come back and you go again. You get up next day and you go again. Then you go again and you go again and you go again, until someday, bang, something happens and you leave the body. And then you look back on your life and you go, I gave it a good crack. I gave it a good crack. But if you don't do that, then I'm saying you've missed the mark, no matter what you do, no matter what else you do.
Yeah, interesting. And I really feel, you know, aligned with what you're saying. And we do have opportunities. We have opportunities to lean into elements of ourselves and loving your destiny, like, and yourself and what you're doing. And it's such a pivotal aspect of making the most of this game that we're participating in. Like, we can be the victim or we can be the hero. Like, we get to choose our role and our avatar and what we're doing in the world. And I can see very clearly, where you're showing up and what you're striving to do with yourself, that then is obviously being put out there for other people to also benefit from what you're doing. So I'm really interested to know now, like, you know, where are you working? Obviously, you're talking about Miles and his work and working with that process. So how can people find you? What can they do with you? You also said leadership and organizational change. And so, yeah, hit me with what you're really doing right
Yeah.
now.
So I love this question because from being comes doing, right? And it's always been interesting to look back at how we have this model of I want to have things in the world, therefore I must do all these other things, and therefore as a result my state of being occurs. So I want to have the money, the house, the title, the job, the money, whatever. Therefore I must do all this stuff that I hate. And therefore my state of being is one of woodenness, depression, anxiety, whatever. And so when you start to flip that in the spiritual world and you start to say, no, my state of being is primary. And from that state of being, then I do things. And then as a result of that, I have what I have. Very difficult transition that I think we're on. And so
Yeah.
my state of being that I am in pursuit of is to be in alignment at all times, which is to literally, very practically, when you close your eyes and you go up into the space of your head and you go up into the light and you develop that connection to divine consciousness, you will realize that whenever you're not there, it hurts so much. And so, and when you come down from that, it's very clear in that space what you should then go and do. And so for me right now, what I've done is I've simplified my life. I've become fully self-employed. I'm now contracting, um, doing work with leadership and organizations. I am going to take 1 or 2 shifts a week as a barista in this beautiful little coffee spot on the Central Coast, because I love making coffee and I love talking to people in the community and sharing the light, being yourself, and just, I love that. And that's not a decision I would ever have made 2 years ago, because that's not good for your career and financials, right? Being a barista. So I'm going to do that because it expands me, because it lights me up. Then if you're interested in working with me on your organization, to be a good candidate for this, you must have people challenges in your business. You must think, well, the way the team is working, it's just not harmonious. It's not working well. We're missing deadlines. We're missing sales targets. There's conflict. And you must be willing to then say, if I'm going to lead this organization out of this, it starts with working on myself so that I can work on the others, and then helping them to start working on themselves too, and working together really effectively. And so I love doing that work with a leader who's keen to work on themselves and then learn, because it's all spiritual ultimately, whether you're learning to be better at sales or better at coaching or better at creating high performing teams. It all comes back to improving your own state of being and then the skills needed to work with more love and more direction with people. So very interested in that sort of work. The next thing is, if you want to work with me as a soul alignment mentor, that's one-to-one work, which is really about uncovering your soul blueprint as I described today, awakening to who you truly are, right? Consciousness itself, and then doing the healing work to stay in that place, whether it's ancestral trauma work or whether it's work on inner child work, this whole area. I am taking on clients in that as well. So I've got a number of long-term clients in that space. And that's just something that's come to me more as I've become better at soul alignment. And over the last 2 years of practicing it, I've started to attract people who want to be mentored on that. So there's, I'd love to do some work with people in that. And also the podcast. So if anyone's interested in being a guest or listening to the podcast, it's Humankinder. And Humankinder is about humankind becoming humankinder, evolving, and individuals becoming kinder, because that's what happens when we evolve. We just become kinder humans, because ultimately at our nature, an aspect of nature is love. And so we explore all these sorts of topics. And then the final thing that I'm doing is I'm becoming a dad. And becoming a dad and trying to be the best version of the father that I possibly can be, and really prioritizing that. And so that's my number one priority, actually. And then the rest will flow from that. So, and that's going to be a lot of triggers, a lot of challenges. It's going to be really good ground for spiritual work. It sounds a bit like clinical when you look at it like that, but it's like actually the most useful place for you to bring the wholeness of your being is for your kid. And so I will be prioritizing lots of time for that and less time on the typical career places for the next while anyway. So that's happening in June. And so those are things. And it's like, the idea here is I am running an experiment where I live my life solely around the question of what lights me up the most. How am I being? What state of being? How can I stay in the most expansive states of being possible? And then, therefore, what does life bring me? And that's what life is bringing me at the moment, in terms of external actions. But the number one thing I'll continuously be doing is the inner work, because from there, everything else flows. And without that, nothing else flows. And so, yeah, that's me. And if you want to connect with me, I've got a website, www.humankinder.com.au, also Instagram, human_kinder, and you can search the pod on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And all my details are on the website as well.
Amazing, amazing. And just to kind of wrap things up, like in this Cian McEnroe, in this moment, like future vision for you and the world, what's lighting you up? What's that shining star that you're moving towards, which is a representation of who you're being and who you're becoming?
Yeah, it's a soul aligned world. It's a soul aligned world. It's a world where every human being knows who they are and why they are here. So, who they are means direct inquiry into the nature of consciousness so that you realize that you are the awareness that is aware of everything that's happening. You are not the contents of consciousness, right? First of all. And then from that space, right, you start to connect more with your soul, because an aspect of soul is this loving awareness. And then you start to realize, well, wait a minute, actually, this separation that I feel as the awareness and then something that's being observed, that's a bit of an illusion as well. And then you have this unity experience where you start to say, wait, I am everything. I am everything. And this sense of separateness is a persistent illusion at this level of reality, but it actually doesn't exist. And so you start to realize, who am I? I am everything. I am the world. I am consciousness. I am you. I am me at the ultimate level. And then I start to live my life more in alignment with that. And then why am I here? Knowing that, how am I being placed? What is my soul purpose blueprint? So if every human being knows who they are and why they are here, then we have a soul aligned world where people are embodying what their soul are here to experience en masse. And the level of consciousness in this planet is going up. And so if that is in the destiny of this planet, then that would be beautiful. If it's not, we would just continue to, it's this in the same way, to do that for ourselves, and to see the reverberations and effects that that has for everyone else. Because the number one thing that you can do is to do that work on for yourself. As the Buddha said, the best thing you can do for other people is to awaken yourself. And if you're doing that, then everything else automatically flows. And so that for me is the vision. That's the goal. And hopefully it's something that happens. Like, I selfishly want that because I just think that would be beautiful. If it's in alignment for that to happen for the world and destiny, I think it will have. But I definitely feel called to be a part of that, purely because it just feels so much better. I think people think like spirituality is about sacrifice and everything. It's like, it's really not. It's like, I feel shit and I want to feel better. And suddenly then, as you start to seek more into that, you realize, oh, this is how. The reason I feel shit is because I'm denying my true nature and I'm succumbing to trauma and conditioning when I'm so much more than that. And once I align with that truth, everything starts to flow better. And I just feel, so it's ultimately a selfish act, you know, you know what I mean? That we're all doing, but it's an enlightened sort of self-interest. And so, yeah, working with Miles Trainer to do that and build out Soul Alignment Method. So soulalignmentmethod.com is a great place to go if you're interested more in this, and build that out. And we're building out an organization on it, building an app for that, really starting to look at what is going to come into the world through Soul Alignment Method, and could we create the conditions for everyone to know who they are, why they are here, and be living it in this lifetime. And so that's the mission for the next 40, 50 years. And so that's really where I'll be focusing my main attention from a career perspective.
Yeah, that sounds like the a very high vibrational place to be pouring your intention and attention, and I absolutely applaud that. It's like it's almost welcoming, like offering the opportunity for people to remember the truth of who they already are, and I think we have to do that first, and that's your journey by the sounds of it, certainly my journey, and I just graciously appreciate you coming on here. I'm very grateful that you came and spoke to me at the Living Free Festival. I think it's kind of fitting that we met there, um, and and that we've had this chance to talk today and really get inside your heart and your head and your experiences. And thank you so much
Yeah,
for sharing
and
that so vulnerably
no,
with us.
and
Yeah, all
thank
the
you
best
as
with
well. Thank you. Yeah,
little
thank you
one.
so much. And thank you for embodying the opposite of the current way of thinking and doing around podcasting. Around, I know that you and I, from a traditional sense, would be seen as competitors in this space. You and I would be seen maybe as competitors because I know you do similar work in aligning people with their soul's purpose and all these things, and you do beautiful work there. You do all these sorts of things. And traditionally, people go, "Oh, that's competition." It's like why would you platform this person? Why would you share this? And thank you for embodying the solution, which is abundance and cooperation, and realizing that we are all here to have whatever impact we want to have on the people that are meant to come to us. We're all helping each other wake up. And we're part of a much bigger shared purpose, which is, as you say, to raise the vibration of the planet, right? And to teach others to do the same. And
Yeah.
so, with that unification of purpose, we can collaborate and we can work together. And thank you just for walking the walk and embodying the solution, and for throwing the old paradigms of competition in the dustbin where they belong, and for being such a light. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Tim.
Pleasure. We're on the same team, brother, and those souls who resonate with you, have the more opportunities they have to feel you, the more opportunities they have to find you. So we're all, once we get past that competition paradigm, which I'm very, very committed to moving beyond, we realize that there's really no such thing. It was just an indoctrination, and that we're in this together, all of us. Let's do it together. Let's have fun together. Let's honor each other together. And I love that. And I really appreciate you saying that and seeing that. And it gave me just full body goosebumps, and makes me feel a bit emotional, because, what we all really desire is just to be seen, the depth of who we are. And I saw you today, brother, and I thank you for showing up with that, and yeah, honor
Thank
that.
you, brother.
Thank you.
And if anyone is interested in connecting with me and working on soul alignment or anything, just reach out, and I'm happy to do half an hour call to see if it's something that's in resonance, and we can go from there. I'm so lit up by this work, and if it comes or it doesn't come, I'll continue to pursue it. So thank you for helping me spread the word, Tim, and the
Yeah.
best of luck with everything you're doing in this podcast. It's going to be amazing to hear from people how what you said and the people you've brought on this, how it affects their life. And you realize that we're all just helping each other through whatever content we create, whatever moment, and it'll come to someone perfectly at the right time. And they'll go, you know what, when I listened to that, it really helped me with this challenge or that challenge. And so, yeah, never underestimate the power of
Yeah.
your contribution, brother.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. And we'll get all those links from you and get Billy to put them up. Thank you, Billy, for doing the back end. Otherwise, this podcast would not exist. Um, Thank you, brother, for coming on. And I will talk to you very soon.
See ya.
Thank you, mate. Well, here's our little Marvel moment right at the end. If you've gotten this far, if you've watched through all of the intros and the speaking and the outros, well, this is our little Marvel moment. And this is who we're going to be having next week. So if you miss that, who knows what might not shift in your reality.